At this time, I'd like to present the Bloomington Normal Economic Development Council, President John Hesse, and our new CEO, Patrick Hoban. Gentlemen.
Well, thank you very much. As a rookie to this, I've got to say I'm extremely impressed with what I've had the opportunity to walk in on, and I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here and appreciate the chance to introduce, perhaps not for the first time to many of you, but certainly reintroduce Patrick here in just a moment. I thought it would be maybe kind of nice for those of you who've been following the Economic Development Council just for the last year. That we've obviously gone through a lot of change, and many of you, I think, know this, and many of you have been a part of this. So, again, for that, I thank you. But it was approximately, or a little more than a year ago, where Kyle Hamm stepped down as the CEO of the Economic Development Council that sort of put us immediately on that where do we go from here moment. And I can tell you that where we got to is a fantastic result, but how we got there was nothing short of a lot of hard work by many of you in this room, and 6 or 7 of us in particular who took part in a search committee. So again, if I could rewind just a little bit, when Kyle resigned, we took a good hard look at ourselves, those of us who were on the board, and really wanted to know where should the Economic Development Council go from here? What should that structure look like? What should the leadership look like? And how do we want to continue on and embed ourselves in the greater McLean County community? And so ultimately what we made the decision to do was engaged a company by the name of the Development Consortium here out of Central Illinois to basically help walk us through that process. And although the names were protected to protect the innocent, I think many of you may have been a part of that process that took part in individualized interviews, roughly 54, 55 community members here to basically help us decide who should we be. And so that process was very exhaustive, I'll have you know. We got a lot of great feedback on where the EDC had been, where we should go, what some of our mistakes had been, and what some of those things we might want to think about in earnest going forward. And so after that process, which took the better part of 6 to 8 weeks, towards the end of the year, we got a very, very resounding conclusion that an independent, vibrant Economic Development Council was imperative for the growth here in McLean County, and so we were excited about that. From that moment forward, and I do think there's certainly a few names that are worthy of being called forward this evening, and I'll start with Mark Peterson, who I didn't look around the room carefully enough to know if Mark is here in the room. Everybody knows who Mark is. Mark with GovHR led our basically the process to find Patrick, and I'm very pleased, and hopefully you would be as well, to find out that we had well over 30 candidates who applied for this position, spanning over 13 states, and then when we narrowed it down to ultimately 7 individuals that we interviewed. That was, we had an Iowan, we had someone from Indiana, and then everybody else was from the state of Illinois, from Central Illinois as well as up in the city. So really a good cross-section of candidates interviewed for this position. And if you'll bear with me really quickly, Pam Reese, Tim Gleason, Camille Rodriguez, Bill Lawrence, myself, Mary Bennett Hendricks, Aaron Quick, and I might be missing somebody else, and I sure hope I'm not. But that was ultimately who made up the group that went through this interview process with Mark's guidance. The hours and the energy that Mark put into this to help us arrive at what was ultimately a unanimous decision to bring Patrick in could not have been done without him. And I guess as one more editorial remark, although that process too was relatively new to me, I don't know if we could have been more pleased with not just the cross-section of individuals that took place in that selection committee, but the manner in which we worked with one another, the manner in which we came to a consensus with one another, and quite candidly, the candor that we exhumed with one another that were out there. So it was just a fantastic process, and we're pleased with that. So again, without much more to say with that, Patrick has been here now, I believe, 2 months to the date. Very pleased to have him here. I'm going to step down and introduce Patrick to you and let him really carry this forward, because I think he, obviously being the expert, is one that needs to let you know what lies ahead for us in the Bloomington Normal Economic Development Council. So Patrick Hoban.
Thank you very much, John. As John said, I've been on the job 2 months, so I've got all this figured out and we're ready to go and ready for your support. Actually, no, it's an ongoing process. As Charlie said, this is a team sport. It's going to take all of us to get this done. What I thought I'd do tonight, since I have been here for 2 months, I could talk a little bit about what we're doing now, but I really want to talk about the whole economic development ecosystem and how everybody plays a part. Right now, we have a staff of 3. There's no way we're accomplishing everything on here. I mean, we're going to hire according to the strategic plan when we get there, but in the meantime, I mean, even forward after we have our strategic plan, we're going to rely on all of our community partners because this is a team sport. A little bit about myself. I am a graduate of McLean University. Sorry for all the Wesleyan people. I've been getting boos all over town every time I go somewhere. They see my little binder here in Milliken and they frown upon it. I also got my Economic Development Finance Professional designation from the National Development Council. That means that I can take numbers of an incentive or numbers from a business, spread them, compare the ratios to see if it's a good deal or not. I can also do the ROI after that to see if it's going to be the return for our citizens that we're looking for. I'm also a certified economic developer, which takes about 5 to 6 years worth of coursework to accomplish. It's also a 2-day testing process where you have to pass a written test, a multiple choice test, and then if you get past that, you have to get grilled by 3 of your peers in an oral exam. So made it into that club. And finally finished up with a master's in business analytics from the University of Notre Dame. Analytics is a passion of mine. I'm a numbers guy, so it fed right into what we're doing here, and we're going to use this going forward as we combine analytics with economic development best practices. So what is economic development? You can probably ask any economic developer out there, they'll give you a different answer. This is straight off of IEDC's website. Personally, I like to think of economics as the efficient allocation of scarce resources. Economic development is the development of those scarce resources. There's a variety of resources. We'll talk about some of those in a second. So what's our role? We're definitely the analysts when it comes to knowing the strengths, the weaknesses, comparative and competitive advantages of your region. A catalyst to be able to access incentives to leverage different kinds of investment. A gap filler to provide assistance where the markets cannot and will not meet the needs of the community. And also an advocate, speaking on the well-being, both internally and externally. We're also an educator, which is some of what we're doing tonight. I really want to continue this process to educate everyone on what economic development is. And then visionary, studying emerging issues. One of the questions they asked me whenever I interviewed was, what do you see yourself or this organization 5 to 10 years? And I said, right now with the rise of the machines and all the different things that are out there, it's kind of hard to predict that far. You got marijuana on the horizon. There's going to be a lot of changes coming up, but it's our job to study everything that's coming. Who are our customers? This is not just the EDC, this is a whole as a community and economic development. We have to pay attention to the businesses who do business here, the residents who live here, also the workforce who works here. Some of our workforce doesn't live here. They still matter. They're still paying taxes. And then also the visitors, as we heard from our CVB, very important. There's nothing better than outside money. The mission itself is to grow the local economy by assisting with local business expansion, recruiting new businesses and companies to the area, and encouraging the next wave of entrepreneurs to establish their businesses here. Now this is an overall process outline, so I have it broken down into goals and objectives. As we work on our strategic plan, each objective will get broken down into strategies, which will be prioritized, and from there, there's going to be individual tactics for each strategy. All these will have metrics, all these will be prioritized. Hopefully, we'll have something to the board at our next board meeting to start going over some of these. The plan was just to have a menu, like here's some low-hanging fruit, here's some big picture items we need to focus on. But like I said, there's 3 of us, and until I can figure out the strengths and weaknesses of all the other organizations, we're not going to know what we can accomplish yet. So the goals are pretty simple. You develop your resources, which in turn, if you have good resources, your businesses can develop. And then if your businesses are developing, they're going to invest back in the community. If there's investment back in the community, you can develop more resources. Wash and repeat. We'll start off with the resource development side. We definitely have to have adequate infrastructure, eliminating blight, neighborhood beautification, and as Charlie mentioned earlier, skilled workforce. This cannot be repeated enough. We have to work as a team on skilled workforce. Starting off with adequate infrastructure. The EDC's role in this is really inventory right now. Like we're really focused on finding out all available sites, all available buildings that are out there, what are they being served by? Whenever we get an RFP in from the state of Illinois or anyone just calling up interested in a site, we have to know how much water's there, how much power's there, is there fiber in the area, is there rail access? All that has to be tracked. It's also something that we do with One Voice. We lead those trips. We find out what infrastructure projects are out there. And I believe the most recent example that we had of that is the Uptown funding, or Uptown Station funding was part of that. So it's something that we're looking for projects moving forward. So if anyone wants to talk about that, we are planning our next One Voice trip, and we're going to need to get projects on the table. Next is blight elimination. The easiest way to spur economic development outside of creating some new infrastructure is just cleaning up your own backyard. I mean, that's like inventory right now. If we have vacant buildings, chronic vacancies, buildings that maybe need to come down, I haven't seen them yet. Our brownfield list, if there is contaminated sites here, there's funds that we need to match up for that. But in order to find out what that is, be the conduit to give that to the developers and figure out what we can do moving forward to take care of those properties. That's a really easy way to spur development. We also lead the Community Development Corporation. It's something that we're looking at right now, possibly land banking some of this. But it's an easy way, metric-wise, to track our initiative activity, but also base everything off of the site's ROI. If there's a low-hanging fruit out there that we need to go tackle and take down and clean up, that's an easy way to do it. One of the examples I noticed this before I got here, where Portillo's was an old Motel 6. And so without even Portillo's come in, I would recommend taking down that Motel 6. If you have underutilized properties, it's easier to develop green grass than it is for an investor to come in and look at a busted piece of property. Neighborhood beautification-wise, currently this is not something that's on our radar. If it's something that we need to participate in, other economic development agencies have. This is something that really the municipalities focus on. So if you're thinking about wayfinding signs, I believe the EDC did assist in Bloomington's wayfinding committee in the past. But beautification, if you're talking about streetscapes, street lamps, those kind of things, that's more on the side of the municipalities, but something that we can definitely be a part of moving forward. And then skilled workforce. I mean, like I said, it's a race for talent right now. I'm saying whenever I left Decatur and I went up to Tinley Park, I realized that that's where the talent's at. As soon as I got on that elevated train, got on the metro, saw everyone fleeing up there, there's no workforce issues at all. That's where they all go. So we need to figure out a way to either keep them here or actually attract and bring them back home when they're ready to settle down. So right now I'm being in inventory to figure out what the skilled workforce needs are. That's something that we will be doing with our business retention expansion process and being a conduit, partnering with the chamber, partnering with Heartland, finding out what these needs are. If we're pulling all this information in on a daily basis, we need to get that out so something can do something about it. Business objective-wise, our second goal, we've got business retention and expansion. We need to remove barriers, enhance our local business, and nurture entrepreneurship. So with business retention and expansion, this is number one on my list. I want to have a full-time staff member that this is all they do. They walk around and they ask businesses, well, just right off the bat, thank you for doing business here. There's nothing worse than losing a business. I know it's great to win, but losing hurts more. Thank them for doing business here. Ask them if they're in growth mode, and if they're not in growth mode, what are those barriers? I mean, what's keeping you from growing? And then we can do something about it. We are going to be the lead on this, something that we're already doing. Since I've been here, I haven't tracked them all, but the amount of businesses that we've already met with is pretty impressive, and a lot of workforce issues already coming up with them. We'll be tracking the initiative activity, the businesses that we retain, and the businesses who expand will turn over into the investment side. Next one is removing the barriers that are out there. Just inventory again. If we're doing our business retention and expansion visits, there's going to be a lot of common themes. And we need to be a conduit with that. And then also, we started working with our regional partners. So the economic development pros that are out of Decatur, that are out of Champaign, that are out of Peoria, that are out of Springfield, we have a lot of the common issues. And right now, there's a lot of new people at the state of Illinois and their economic development department. So we need to work together to make sure that the state knows there's more to Illinois than what's north of I-80. I mean, we have to get those money back here. I know for a fact that when you're up there, the money goes there. That's where the incentives go. We need to pull that back down here. So by removing barriers, metrics. Enhancing the businesses that are here. For that, it's just being a conduit of best practices. One of the things that Zach's working on now is going around and finding all the tools that are in the toolbox. Like we manage our enterprise zone, but there's other tools that are out there. Our local workforce board has other incentives. The state has incentives. There's different things that are available in this community that have not been communicated. So we're going to package that together, take it to our BR&E visits, but also use that toolbox when we're marketing and recruiting new businesses in. With that one will be initiative activity, then also businesses assisted. Every time that we send out an email, if someone has an inquiry, that's being tracked. Hopefully that inquiry leads to a project, which leads to more investment. Nurture entrepreneurs. This is hard, I'm not gonna lie. I saw that whenever the Be an Advantage document, I read through and I saw that we got tasked with entrepreneurship, and I was like, man, that's a tough one. It's easier to bring someone in than it is to get that startup. I mean, Distill, that's a wonderful story, but I mean, it's tough to get somebody to start up. Something we're happy to participate in. But it's going to take a lot of people that are outside of our organization to pull this off. That's why it's wonderful that ISU's got an incubator coming on. Wesleyan's got their SBDC. We're meeting with all of them to try to figure out how we can create this network, really, because it's not just one organization that's going to do entrepreneurship, but it has to be a family of people working on this together. But right now, again, it's finding out what those resources are, getting people in the pipeline and the assistance that they need to pull this off, because it's not easy. We'll be tracking the entrepreneurship activity, but also the amount of assisted entrepreneurs that we've helped out, again, with the inquiries. Now, the whole point of all that is to get everybody to hopefully invest back in the community. Right off the bat, to do that, streamlining incentives is a must. Encouraging the development for what we have here, marketing and recruiting with the available sites and the community itself, and then at the end of the day, project management. That's where we spend a lot of our time. So streamlining our incentives. What I discussed earlier about that toolbox, we need to know what we have. Right now, we are the leads on the Illinois Enterprise Zone program. There are other programs out there that the state has, and some programs come and go. Sometimes the feds have programs. We just have to monitor that and know what's available. Both municipalities have their own TIF districts. So there's a way to combine all these incentives in order to seal the deal, but it has to make sense. So that's one thing that we'll be doing is going through and running the analysis on these numbers in order to pull this off. With those, we'll be looking at the initiative activity and then the incentive-specific activity after that. One of the things that I was asked before coming in is like, how can, as a community, how can we all help with this? And right now, I would love to have just like a standard incentive policy across the board so that you guys can go out and sell all of our incentives right now. Because right now we don't have that in place. If you hit certain benchmarks in certain states, it says on their website, if you do A, you get A. If you do B, you get B. If we had that right now, you guys can all go sell as well. So I think that would help out a lot if we just standardize some things off the get-go. Encouraging developments. This is almost like business retention expansion, but with the local developers and the local realtors. So finding out what their needs are. How long has your space been available? Do you have a piece of land out there that's not moving, and why not? Is it because it's contaminated, or is it because it's missing infrastructure? So keeping track of all the site inventory is a must for us, and then being a conduit in between the developers and the businesses. The metric on that is, again, the initiative activity. We spend a lot of time. I've already met with some developers here locally and finding out what they've done in the past and what they could use going forward. But some metrics, and the metrics that are on here are minimal. Like as we get into the strategies and the tactics, there will be metrics for every single one of those. Because if we have a tactic that's not working, I mean, like I said, there's 3 of us. I'm not going to waste my time on it. We have to base our incentive or our initiatives off of ROI as well. But then at the end of the day, the investment is a big one that's easy to track. Marketing and traction. We've been tasked with marketing the area, but also recruitment. In the past and moving forward, I've already signed up for one of them. I'm going to site selector conferences. Another key to the business retention expansion visits is asking our local businesses if they'll share it, who their suppliers and who their buyers are. Because if we know that there's somebody locally that has a supplier that's so far away, we can go with them out there to pull them back in so everyone saves on logistics cost. So that's another key of the business retention expansion side of things. With this, we'll be tracking the overall activity. The prospect visits, that's the best part of my job is when there's a prospect in town. I would almost, this is being recorded, but I'd love to stage it. So we just run into one another somewhere and you talk about how wonderful it is while I have these prospects here. When we're driving around and I just say, hey, we might be downtown for lunch. If you just want to pop in and say how great it is to do business here, that's what sells. That's actually what Rivian did. Rivian was here. They asked the citizens, what do you think of this place? They loved it, and that's why they're here now. So setting that up, getting more prospects in town, more businesses in town, more developers in town is how we're going to do this as a team effort. And then also, at the end of the day, it's the businesses attracted as far as this one goes. And then we look at project management. We spend a lot of time here, the deal facilitation side. Whenever we get that first lead in, if someone's got a lead, they say, can you follow up with this? We track every aspect of it. There's a file folder on every single one that comes through. We spend our time. I worked on a deal that took 12 years. That intermodal yard that was in Decatur, that thing took 5 years. So I mean, some of these things move really fast and some of them are really slow. But at the end of the day, it's a coordination with a lot of people to pull these things off. Sometimes you get the state involved, sometimes you get the Fed involved. But overall, like it can be done. And how we're going to track this, and I'm going to try to get away with it, is by coding everything so that you know what our activity is. I don't want you guys to ever ask, what are you working on? Like there will be a report that comes out quarterly. You're not going to know what the business is, but I will give you the high-tier NAICS code. So you'll know it's transportation or it's manufacturing. It'll have some funny name to it. But then we'll talk about it's this many jobs and this much investment. And at some point, hopefully closer than 5 to 10 years, you're going to see that come through and you'll say, oh, that's what we saw so long ago as we continue to work these deals. But the goal is to track the jobs, track the wages, track the investment, and show the ROI. If there's going to be incentives involved, we need to be able to see that over time, we're going to get our money back and that everyone's going to grow because of it. So that was about 13 years worth of education crammed into 15 minutes. That's the process. It's also, I mean, if you guys ever want to talk about any one of these individually, I've got a manual about that thick on it and how we're going to do it and how we're going to track it. But really, the goal of all this is every single thing on here is an initiative. All those initiatives lead to the last one, which is project management. I don't want to get caught in the weeds spending too much time on initiatives when we can be doing deals at the end of the day. I'm here to do deals and bring in investment. So if there's somebody else that can handle some of these, definitely let's find someone to do it. But we need to figure out what the biggest return is going to be for our community. Like I said, starts off at the bottom, infrastructure all the way up, but at the top, we're trying to get to the deal at the end of the day. And I'm thinking I should have got a water. Questions? But I have to brag, we just hit 20 minutes on the nose, so.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick.
Sure.
So I remember the last time we had this meeting, we were in a room, I think it was this one, where the conversation was that we have to fight against our last name, which is Illinois. So whether it's Bloomington or Normal, we have to fight against the perception that Illinois is bad for business. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that. How will you, and with the EDC, try to combat our kind of preconceived notion that Illinois is bad for business and make it stand out with all the assets that we have in our community?
Go back to the resources. Side story, I know I used to say it all the time, I could sell Decatur, I couldn't sell Decatur, Illinois. It's not true. Over the past 10 years, they've had $1 billion worth of investment there. So you sell your resources. We do have talent here. We've got 2 awesome universities. We're in agriculture heaven right now. We've got some major industry that's doing very well. So it's capitalizing off what they're doing, telling those success stories. I think that's what we need to get back to is when we have a win, like I know that we're from the Midwest, we don't like to spike the football, but we have to spike the football. You have to let like Rivian right now, like I think we're in Wired Magazine. That's awesome. Getting that kind of press. So it's not Illinois. Like why are they here? Like they're here because there's capability here. And we do have the ability to do it. And we can't keep saying that it's Illinois and Illinois doesn't win because over time, Illinois has won. It's easy to get Illinois like Indiana says on their billboards whenever you're looking at different things. But no, we have investment going on here. So it's telling that story, getting away from the uncertainty of the past. Like uncertainty kills more deals than anything. If they don't know where they're going to get hit from, that's what they don't like. They don't like I have a developer come in, they're like, how long is this going to take? And it's, I don't know. I got to wait on the state, dead. That we have to compete and be ready to go. And so we can do it. We just have to tell our story. I know people have questions. Yeah.
Patrick, what would be the top 2 or 3 things that the local municipalities and the county could do to help you and your mighty staff of 3? You've got some tall orders here to
Sure.
accomplish. So top of your list, what can we do to help? I think was another question mentioned earlier, so I'll pose it to you.
Celebrate the wins, so sell. Like we're all in sales, we're all selling our community right now for sure. Standardizing incentives I think would be huge. If we can all get on the same page and say, this is a minimum. If you do these, we're gonna have something to work with. And then what would be another one that you guys can do? I'm going to go back to the sales. Just tell the story that's out there. If you hear people saying something that's not true, I get Illinois is Illinois, but we're winning right now. One of the reasons I even chose this job was I saw what Rivian was doing. I said, you got to be kidding me. Like they're going to be the next Tesla. I want to be part of that. So it's telling that story, standardizing, telling the story.
Tesla, I hope.
Yeah, on my 8 years from being on the county board, sometimes it seems like the only time we hear from the EDC is when they want money from us, or when they want something from us. And is there anything that you're trying to do that maybe you can streamline rules amongst the municipalities and the county to try to bring in businesses, as opposed to the incentive is always something monetary? Other incentives that are not just requiring the taxpayer to have to pony up.
Definitely, there's other incentives that are out there. The whole process itself in the site selection and almost going back to the eliminating the uncertainty, that's an incentive. If they know that this can go through, time is money. So if we can pull that off, they're not all going to be based off incentives. Like there's certain areas that are inside the enterprise zone where they're going to qualify for some sales tax exemption for sure. But not everybody needs an incentive to pull off a deal. So I think it's going to have to come back to looking at and prioritizing what are those industries that we want to go after and incentivize, and what ones do we not want to incentivize, and then try to balance it from there. As far as hearing from us, I plan on doing quarterly reports of some of that information that's there, and then to my board members, I want to have a dashboard that you can actually log on to and see where we're at. So I definitely want to talk to you more than when I need money. I'm also available for lunch or beverages sometime. Yeah.
Patrick, talking about some of these packages, you know, if you do A, you get A, if you do B, you get B. Can you talk about some communities that you're aware of or that you've worked with?
Sure.
And kind of give us a picture of what those packages look like.
I don't want to steal another thing from Decatur, but they literally had it built in the enterprise zone that if you met a certain investment level and you had a certain number of jobs, you automatically got a 5-year graduated abatement. So it wasn't like all of it. It's like first year you get 100% abatement, only on what's new. Next year you get 80%, then 60%, and then 40%, then 20%, then gone. So that was like, if we all agree that you need this many jobs of this caliber, you need this much to be invested in our community, and it's only on the new increment created, then you would get that. If that happens, that incentive's already in place. And it's on the increment, so it's a concept of giving away or getting 50% of something compared to 100% of nothing. Like it's only on what's new. So no one's losing anything. Yes?
So how could we improve our bargaining position if we got into the habit of working together as communities and as a county instead of bidding against each other and racing to the bottom with incentives? I mean, would we gain an advantage at the bargaining table if we had a united front?
For sure, definitely. It's even something as we've been meeting with our regional partners in Springfield and Decatur and Peoria, the same concept. Like we're not going to, because if they get a project, we're actually going to win too. There's no real reason, because I've seen it happen. I've literally been in a room where I've had somebody told me the town next door is offering me X, and I'm texting them as they're saying it. No, they're not. You know, so you have to be able to call them out. If we all come to an agreement on what this could be, set a standard, set of rules, then we're all going to work together. Right now, I mean, the members that I'm working with Tim and Pam, I mean, everything looks like it's on the up and up, and we're in a good spot right now. So we need to keep it that way. And I think the standardization of some incentives can help out. But I agree, you can't race to the bottom. I mean, that's like, if you look at what Amazon pulled off or what Foxconn pulled off by going to Wisconsin, Foxconn's never going to see, like Wisconsin's not going to get the benefit. I just realized I'm getting recorded right now. They're not going to see it because a lot of people are still going to live in Chicago. They're not going to see that full benefit. So I agree that you cannot race with incentives. But we should come up with some kind of standardized policy, though.
Hi, welcome to the McLean County, Bloomington Normal. One of the bodies that aren't here, the school boards, Heartland, a lot of times with previous incentives, they are really taking it on the chin based on how taxes are structured with the property tax abatements. Can you talk about your engagement with other taxing bodies in this so that it's not those, 87 or Unit 5 having to bite the bullet on these incentives?
Sure. So biting the bullet, they're biting the bullet on new taxes that are coming in? Is that what's happening? I'm confused. If it's an abatement off of an increment, so right now, your land is assessed at $100,000. Somebody builds a plant that's worth $1 million. They're only abating the new. They didn't lose anything. And if anything, within 5 years, they get it all. So I'm not sure how anyone's taking it on the chin if it didn't exist before.
It's not a 5-year time frame.
But it's still off of what's new, right? Am I missing something? Are we giving away current taxes, or is this just new? We are giving away current taxes?
Adding students, adding households and students without adding any more to the economic tax base. That's the issue.
But if it's on a plant, and the house goes over here, the residential goes up, right? So they should be getting it for the students.
The concern that I've heard from the school districts, and to step on it, is that a lot of these abatement deals are like 23 years long, so that even though the
Oh, you're talking about TIFs.
costs go up for periods of time.
Okay,
yeah.
sorry.
TIFs.
TIFs, yeah. I was thinking about a regular abatement.
And something unique here too is that we have, school districts that don't line up to city borders. So, something could happen in one city, and the reality is, most of those employees may not live at, you have other districts that are seeing that increase in student population.
So if it's a residential development that's inside of a TIF, is that what we're getting at? Because if you add a new business inside of a TIF and a new residence pops up somewhere else, that should increase the increment for the school board. If it's inside of a TIF and the increment's there and that's being held on for 23 years, it's still, that's on the business, not on the home where they're coming from. If you're adding new residents inside that TIF, that needs to be accounted for. And that's actually in the legislation. That says if the school board can prove that you have residents inside that TIF, you have to give the money back based on a formula. So it's still based off the increment. I get 23 years though, that's a long time.
I've never heard anybody talk so fast.
Even Charlie?
Where's
I
Charlie?
thought Charlie was gonna be here.
You put all of your experience into 20 minutes.
Like, man, I got somebody who can keep up.
And I also
Yeah,
am
that's
very
the thing.
glad to see that you mentioned infrastructure. And I think that was one of the first things.
Yes.
And for those who know me, I've been beating the dead horse that infrastructure needs to be number one, and I appreciate that. I also would like to know if you consider the population to employment ratio for a particular area when you're considering incentives to give a company, and then, you know, how many ancillary businesses they bring in?
How many other businesses?
Well, yeah,
Oh, yes. So there's a formula that what we can do is there's a multiplier effect for different businesses. Certain businesses create other jobs more than other ones do. So I would almost say basing those incentives off an employer that has a higher multiplier, meaning that, you know, if you're making a certain amount of wages, I'm assuming at Rivian, they're gonna be making decent wages doing, you know, hard work, that they're gonna create other jobs. Those should have a higher incentive than bringing in somebody else who doesn't have a high multiplier. So the way that I almost wanna structure this is that, like, the years that go along with this incentive, if you hit certain benchmarks, it would go longer. You know, the more localized you can make this, the bigger the return you can show us, the longer it would go. Does that make sense?
one more question. I always hear economic impact. Can you address fiscal impact in relation to economic development?
So the fiscal impact and the economic impact side of things is it's pretty similar as far as the money coming back in the community. It's almost what we just talked about with that ripple, because you're gonna have the direct jobs of the people that work at whatever project there is. Then there's gonna be indirect jobs that are created off of that. Some of those people will live in your community, some of them won't. Right now, we have people that are gonna work at Rivian that live in Peoria. So we need to be able to map out per industry what's gonna have the biggest fiscal impact. Once you know the economic impact, then you need to do a cost-benefit analysis. The cost-benefit analysis side of things is going to show you how much infrastructure is this going to cost us. You know, because certain types of development cost more to a city than it does another one. So we need to have that lined up with the economic impact analysis. Then we're going to be able to see, you know, is it worth it or not? And we can do that with a decision tree. There's a lot of analytical techniques that we can use to show, you know, we just need to know what the standard is right now.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Down to the end of our meeting. Is there anyone that has anything else to offer? Any board members? I hope you take an opportunity to, if you don't know someone on one of the councils or board, to interact here for a few minutes after this meeting. Also, we have a few new assistant city managers you might not know. And so if you are here, please stand up. I think Eric Hansen is in here from the town of Normal. And so Cassie Taylor, County one. I don't know, Billy Tyus is here for City of Bloomington, Billy. In the back. And anyone else that we have, Eric Smith is also one of our assistant administrators. It's the county. You probably have met him. He used to be at the highway department. Is there anyone else I'm missing? If not, well, thank you all for coming. It was a very productive meeting. We appreciate your input and interaction.